Well, welcome all you wiretappers out there back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. And I have in my studio via Zoom, Adrien Martinez of Invest in Yourself podcast. So welcome, Adrien.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Gary. I'm honored, man. You're the OG when it comes to this.
I always feel good talking to Adrien. He calls me the OG of this mob podcasting. And, I am. I was the very first guy to start a long time ago, 6, 7 years. I think it's going to be 7 years ago this April, I think it was April, and it was in the spring. So when
Well,
I
I
first
did a
started,
lot.
I put out maybe a couple of months, maybe even go a whole month, not do one, then do 2 or 3. But slowly but surely, I put out one a week for a long time.
I did a lot of research through your channel, man. So I thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I hope you were entertained. I
I
strive to
was.
entertain.
Oh,
That's
yeah, man.
that's my goal in life. And with this podcast, the video and the audio is to entertain people and enlighten them as to some of the history of the mafia in the United States. So
Yeah, people love it. Yeah, there's an audience for sure, man.
Yeah, yes, there is. All right, so now, guys, Adrien is working on a documentary and about the American Mafia in the United States. Is that the title of it?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's called overall. There's 11 episodes altogether. So, but the main title is the rise and fall of the American Mafia, and each episode is about a different crime family, and there's 11 of them.
Okay, cool. And I know I'm in one or two of them. And
Yeah,
I know if you're going to talk about the Kansas City, Chicago, Las Vegas connection, why you got to have me in it because I'm
yeah, those are the ones
paying
you're in.
that.
Yeah, those are what I got you in, and the Jewish one.
I live that. But it goes all across the board, guys, and it's really comprehensive. Now, how will people see that? Are you going to put episodes up on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, what I plan on doing is I'm gonna, just release it on YouTube, and then it'll run for about 3 months, I suppose, because there's 11 episodes, one a week, and then each episode, like I said, is different. So I'll probably start with the 5 New York families, and then branch off to the Chicago outfit, Trafficante family, the Jewish Mafia, Patriarcha, the Philadelphia crime family. And what I did, I went with this. I was able to find someone from each one of those crime families besides the Lucchese to be a part of the documentary.
Cool.
So that was pretty interesting, So I was, pretty happy I was able to do that. That's what kind of inspired me, because I did all these interviews with all these mob guys, and I was like, I've been watching all these documentaries. I was like, shit, let me try to, go and make one myself. I'm so interested with it, So I was just like, well, let's see what we can make. And that's, what I went.
I made actually 4, 5 documentaries altogether, 3
Wow.
in the mob genre, 2 of them that actually have gotten a little bit of play out on Amazon, and it's a tough world. It's a tough thing to do. It's immensely time consuming. Can be really expensive if you try to up the production values, and it's hard to make money off of it too. So
I remember when you were one of the first guys I interviewed for the documentary, because I got Gary on from the law enforcement perspective and stuff on things, and when he told me when I first started, he's like, this is going to be a lot of time. It's going to be a ride. It's going to be a roller coaster, and it sure in the hell was. You know what I mean?
Right,
You're right. I did not think it was going to take that long, because I originally thought I was just going to do a 45-minute episode about it, and then I was like, shit, I could do a whole series, because I got all these other guys. So I did it, and it lasted like 6-7 months now. I'm finally in the promoting stages.
Well, you got her done, and now it's time to promote. So let's tell me about. We're going to play a clip a little bit, and a guy that we're all interested in. I don't think he was ever called the Godfather. Maybe they wanted to be the boss of all bosses, and I don't know if he really wanted to be that. He kind of did, but Lucky Luciano, one of the more famous mob guys. I think partly because he's got such a cool name, but
yes,
Lucky.
he does.
I'll tell you right now, Adrien, when I put a clip up of something about Lucky Luciano, it gets, maybe triple what some other mob guy may get. He's not quite up there with Gotti. Gotti is the king.
Yeah,
but as far as interest from mob aficionados, Lucky Luciano is way up there. So, and I looked at your clip. We'll show it in a minute, folks. Tell me a little bit about this. It's something about the big meeting. He had a big meeting at the Hotel Nacional in Cuba in about 1947 or 48, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that, Adrien.
Well, with the clips, each boss I did, or each member, he was definitely, like you said, a lot of people like him. So there was a lot to do doing research on that. So I did like a 7-8 minute clip, just talking about him and having everyone else's perspective on him. But, when I got to the meeting part, I think after the murder of Joe Masseria, Charles Lucky Luciano became the boss from 1931 to 1946.
Back in Sicily, my great-grandparents came from a town called La Carafridi. And there are two famous people that are from that town. The Sinatra family, Frank Sinatra's family, and another guy named Salvatore Lucania. And any mob people who know anything about the mob know that his name here in this country was Lucky Luciano. And my family knew the Lucanias. I could tell you they were abbracciante. They were people that worked with their arms. They were hardworking peasants. Lucky Luciano, his family were not bad people. I'm in touch with relatives of his when I go back to the town.
Lucky Luciano's crime family controlled lucrative crime rackets in New York City, such as illegal gambling, extortion, bookmaking, loan sharking, and drug trafficking. Lucky Luciano became very influential in the labor union activities and controlled the Manhattan waterfront, garbage hauling, construction, garment district businesses, and trucking. Everything was going smooth for 5 years, and in June 1936, Luciano was convicted on 62 counts of compulsory prostitution, and he was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in state prison. Lucky Luciano's underboss, Vito Genovese, ran the day-to-day operations.
It's where he allowed Vito Genovese to go ahead and take over his family, because he was never going to be able to come back to the United States.
Up until 1937, he was indicted for murder and he fled the country to Italy. So the crime family needed a new acting boss, and that boss would become Frank Costello. During World War II, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government went to Lucky Luciano for help. The United States government feared submarine attacks, so the U.S. government needed the cooperation of all waterfront workers to prevent this. The government needed the mob's help to keep the New York docks free of strikes, sabotages, and any other problems that came up. Lucky Luciano still had control over all the waterfronts even while still in prison, so he agreed to help the government.
Help them so they help you. Lucky Luciano did it. When the war was on, he helped them with the war, and when they questioned him about it, he said, well, we're patriots. It's okay to be a patriot to help yourself, but if I did it, you'd kill me.
This put Lucky Luciano in position for him to bargain for his freedom. In return for all this, in 1946, instead of serving his sentence in prison, he was deported back to Italy. After Lucky Luciano's deportation, Frank Costello became the boss of the family.
Why did the mafia get involved in Cuba, right? That's the question. A big issue was Lucky Luciano, right? After the Second World War, he was obviously head of his family, Luciano crime family in New York City. But the agreement was he was convicted. He was going to be deported. So in 1945, he gets deported after the Second World War back to Sicily, right? So he's back to Italy, and he starts developing a lot of connections. And he develops a connection where he develops a very good heroin connection from North Africa. So this is important because the mafia was kind of more into gambling, extortion, and other stuff, but this would push the mafia big time into heroin trafficking. Really big, lucrative money from them. So he wants to have a major conference. But he can't have it like he did in Atlantic City 10 years earlier, right? They have the major Atlantic City conference because he got deported now. He can't now. So he has Frank Costello acting for him, head of the Luciano family, which would later change names. So he decides that Havana is the perfect place because during Prohibition, Havana was used by a lot of people to bring in alcohol to the United States. Rum runners, right? Alcohol runners, bootleggers, right? Back and forth. So he knew those routes existed. He wants to have a major conference. It's called the Havana Conference in 46. So he goes out there to Cuba. He finally gets into Cuba. He has to be careful because remember the United States doesn't want him anywhere near the United States, and they deported him. This will become a who's who, bigger than Atlantic City Conference of people showing up. They do it at the Hotel Nacional. So you have all the crime families come in to Havana in 46. This is December 46. They all come in there. You have the Trafficante family. But he also wants not just to be Italians, he wants to create an international crime syndicate. He wants to bring into Spanish, the Jews. He wants to bring in Jewish families. He wants to bring them all together, working together.
That was the formation of the original Cosa Nostra. It was an organization called the Syndicate. The Syndicate was a combination of Jews and Italians, but then ultimately what emerged was the Cosa Nostra. The Jews didn't have the hierarchy like the Italians, as I explained to you. Jews were in it for just one generation. The sooner they could get out, they got out. They made their money, invested in legitimate enterprise, and got out. Whereas the Italians raised their children, in many instances, to succeed them.
So you have Meyer Lansky there. You have other Jewish gangsters there that show up. You have Carlo Marcello from New Orleans, his family, he's there. From the outfit, Sam Giancana represents the outfit, right? All the New York families come in. Even Frank Sinatra was documented to be there. So that he showed up. So you see a lot of ties. Sinatra always with the mafia. It seems like he's always around those guys. So that's interesting. So three things come out of it. He says, I've got this major source from North Africa to bring heroin in. There's going to be a lot of money in there. They were first hesitant, but then he exposed how much they can make of it. And he says, yeah, you're right. Now that prohibition's gone, this is illegal, and this is a lot of money in it because the black market just feeds on it, right? With drugs, just like anything else. Alcohol, there's no money anymore. It's legalized. It's hard to make money. So this is where they go for it. He now can't be the head of the Luciano family because he's out, but he wants to be the boss of all bosses for the commission. There's a lot of back and forth about it. Frank Costello and others help him win the vote. He becomes the boss of all boss. So Lucky Luciano then becomes the boss of all boss. And then, of course, he wants to create with these other mafia families and these other groups, ethnic groups, working together to be together. So he says Tampa with the Trafficante family, because they were there, Junior and Senior were there. You guys could be handling the drugs from Havana. It's going to come from Sicily, Italy, to Havana, Havana to Tampa, also from Havana to New York City. The New York City families will handle that, and from Havana to New Orleans, and then you'll have the Marcello family take care of that. So he has a pretty good network. What's going on there, and they thrive. They thrive not only with the drugs, but they build a casino mecca gambling out there in Havana, and it's mafia owned.
I'd forgotten about the whole narcotics thing. That was one of the big reasons for that, because of the source of narcotics he had, and that's when they got into heroin. I know even Kansas City, they were connected through Tampa, through Trafficante. They would send somebody down to Tampa to pick up heroin to bring back to Kansas City for distribution. And so it was, that's mainly what they wanted to do. It sounds to me like, is set up these different distribution points for heroin distribution in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, that's what, it's insane how these guys were able to get together like this. I mean, now you can't do that. You can't get away with, this, with all the footage and surveillance. But, back then these guys could all meet up and it just seemed quote unquote normal. But you're right. I mean, they could do all these plans and set up everything the way they wanted and, go about their business. But eventually, they all fell. I mean, there's the demise of all of them. A lot of these guys, man, whether it was death or prison.
There's a story that at the end of this, that Lucky called Vito Genovese in and beat the crap out of him. I mean, really beat him bad. Now, I guess both of them were kind of little guys. I don't know. It seemed kind of weird to me. Maybe Lucky had some big guys to hold him, beat him up.
Yeah, you're probably right. The whole thing with Lucky Luciano, like I said, there's so much to cover, and I wanted to do it in a short amount of time. So I just put it all in there. I mean, there's so much more to learn about the guy, but yeah. He was really influential when it came to the mafia.
All right, let's take a look at Greg Scarpa.
The Colombo crime family was also known for having strong hitmen in their family. The Colombo crime family's top hitman was Greg Scarpa. He was nicknamed the Grim Reaper, and he was a capo and a hitman for the Colombo crime family. And on top of that, he was an informant for the FBI.
Greg Scarpa had a lengthy relationship with the FBI. And Greg Scarpa was also the guy who recruited people like Larry Mazza into the family.
The way I got in was in college. I was a hardworking kid. I had 2 or 3 jobs. One of the jobs was working in a supermarket. And at that supermarket, I met this older woman. Again, at the time, I was 17, going on 18. She was in the 30 area, a little above. Wound up having a relationship, got very close. So close, she was married, had kids. Still, we kept it going. Eventually, she wants me to meet her husband. And she says he could do a lot of things for me. We're opening up this big company. We can make you the sales manager. You can represent the whole East Coast. This is incredible. So ultimately, I meet him, and it turns out he's a top guy in the Colombo family.
He was a very, very, very violent guy. No question about it. He was playing the role of cooperator, and he was playing the role of wise guy as well. So he had his hands in both of the cookie jars, and that's what made him even more dangerous. He could get away with a lot of stuff because of that.
So he put me in charge of part of his numbers business. And the numbers business is the smallest, lowest level racket that the mob is involved in. And that's where you start. And then it goes on, and before you know it, it's a snowball heading downhill. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. You see a beating take place. Then you back up your buddy because he's my friend. I can't not help him. You get involved, and then he asks you to do something. It's a slow process, but ultimately, Greg is he's grooming me and he's educating me on that lifestyle. He probably was given carte blanche now by the family because he helped them. So they look the other way. Then he's a tremendous earner, so they don't want to kill this guy. He's bringing in, 50, 60,000 a week. He was probably, if not in all of Cosa Nostra, up there at the top of the best killers ever. And I say that because he did the precarious hits. He didn't do the hit where you always read about it. They call your best friend in the basement. There's nobody around except the two shooters, and it's an easy hit. Where you set a guy up in the front seat, the guy in the back seat has the gun. Those are all the ones you see in movies and stuff, and a lot of them are that way. But Greg would do the one where he had to walk into a crowded restaurant, doesn't care that there's two cop cars in front of the place, doesn't care that there's innocent bystanders all over, pops the guy twice, walks out like he just finished lunch. When the family was asked to kill a girl, who did they go to? They went to Greg Scarpa to do it. So he did a lot of the dirty work, and I think they looked the other way.
Greg Scarpa, I remember first hearing about him. He was a bad man.
You're right.
Man. I'll tell you the truth, Adrien. I was shocked. I had no idea that the movie, which I saw when it first came out, Mississippi Burning, and they claimed that the FBI agent kidnapped the guy and threatened to cut his nuts out or something if he didn't tell where the bodies were hidden. And turned out that was based on reality, and Greg Scarpa did that.
Yeah, I mean, from Larry's perspective, I mean, he told me all this stuff that went on, and they would go and do hits and everything. Obviously, when they were going through like the Colombo War, and they just were really brutal when it came to it. But Greg was his mentor, so it's no surprise that Larry committed a murder for whatever it was, but I don't know. I mean, it's just really interesting that, Larry was so close to him, and that, he's able to, talk to us and,
Really?
speak the truth. I mean, because, Greg, his son has actually just recently got out of prison too.
Oh, really?
Greg Jr., yeah.
I didn't realize that. Of course, when it came out that Greg Scarpa had been an informant, then the fact that Larry Mazza, worked for him, and he's the one that brought him in. And I guess when he turns, and whoever he testified against, I don't even know, I can't remember who he testified against now, but whoever he testified against, it must have been one of those situations where he didn't have to stay in the witness protection program, which there's a lot, we're seeing that all over the place now.
Yeah.
They're not staying in witness protection, and nobody's doing anything about it. It used to be, I remember the one guy down in Willie Byoff. They hit a guy, the outfit hit a guy like 4 or 5 years later living down in Phoenix. And he had been actually living under an assumed name, but he he started going back up. He loved to gamble. He started going back up to Las Vegas, and people started seeing him, and he wasn't a threat anymore. They wanted some retribution, and so they hit the guy, and that was always the story. Don't rat out the mafia, because no matter how long it takes and where you go, eventually they're going to get you. But that's not true anymore, is it?
No, we've interviewed lots of guys from that life. But, in Larry's case, he told me that, I did a segment, Frank DiMatteo.
Uh-huh.
And with Larry Massa, we did a segment where informant versus non-informant, they're from two different spectrums. And we were able to pull a segment together and did pretty well. It's still doing well. And they both gave their perspective, and Frank understood why Larry, became an informant. I mean, imagine having your boss, your mentor, Flip, telling you all this stuff to be a wise guy. And then out of nowhere, you find this out. What do you think is going to happen? Why do you think he became an informant? There's a reason, but it's not just like you said, before he could think about flipping, he wouldn't even think about it because he knew Greg would kill him.
Yeah.
But then when he found out Greg, had been an informant for all this time, he's like, no, there's no reason to stay loyal anymore. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Larry's pretty cool though. I enjoy him.
Is he a good guy? Yeah, I've never talked to him. I ought to get him on the show one of these days. A lot of these guys, they may never come out, but I'll tell you what, it's a pretty handy way to deal with some competition in the criminal world.
Yeah. And you see, like, of course, everybody knows, like, Sammy the Bull, he's doing his shows, but I mean, there was so many other underbosses, a few other underbosses, like that flipped, like, what's his name? Phil Leonetti, he's still in hiding. He doesn't do any, I mean, if he goes on shows, they got to be bigger and stuff.
Yeah.
And,
he wrote that book with Scott Bernstein, but you don't ever see him. He wants a lot of money to go on a show, and nobody's paying much money to do this. So.
Yeah. I mean, but think about it. The only boss that has ever done a show, like an actual boss of a crime family, I think was Ralph Natali. And
did he? I didn't remember that.
He did one with I can't remember his name, Patrick something, but it was on a bigger platform and stuff. But
that Vlad TV, Patrick something bet. Yeah, I remember it now. Yeah,
the guys, I mean, they see that kind of stuff and it's kind of like, what the hell, So I mean, it's probably harder to stay loyal to the life, but I'm sure that there's still guys out there. And I know there is. It's just crazy how the YouTube has started a whole genre of. I mean, it's
part of it depends on if they and their family are still in the neighborhood or within the culture, the subculture. In Kansas City, it's kind of a smaller town, and nobody's going to get out there and get public, because they got their friends and their family and extended family. And then I know there's one guy that has done a few things with me, but never about Kansas City. But there's a couple of guys that have really dissed him at, gatherings of like a funeral or somebody's big birthday party. And he went to talk to one of them. The guy just waved him off and said, no. And then he asked around. He found out it's because they knew that he had done some stuff with me. And so he's ostracized now. And in a section of what had been his friends, now he's not involved criminally with them anymore, but they were his friends. He didn't talk. He spent 12 years in penitentiary. He didn't say a word, but because he knows me and I put him out there a little bit, why, they'll ostracize him, and his family will be ostracized because of that, and in a certain small segment. So you got that social pressure. A lot of people don't think about it. It's not just that they're going to kill you, but yet there's a social pressure. If you care anything about these people, or your family cares anything about it. I got a good buddy I play golf with. His son is married to the niece of a guy that got killed. And one of the last mob hits we had here in the city, and when they all get together, there's this huge, big extended family. His cousin had to do a little time because she helped the mob do something and kept her mouth shut, and she ended up doing a little time. but yet he's, squarest John guy in the world. So it's these, it's not simple. That's what I'm trying to say. It's interconnected, and there's a lot of family and social pressure on you to not talk.
And I'll tell you, one that was a really good guy that I got a part of the segment that was a part of so Joe Bonanno's grandson and Bill Bonanno's son.
I saw you.
I did one with him. He goes by Tor Bonanno, but I seen he did one interview before, and I reached out to him on Facebook, and everyone's doing shows and shit with him now, but he's a really good guy. He just gave the perspective on everything that he knew, and so it's good to have that in a documentary. People that are part of the family, because obviously I can't talk to Joe Bonanno, or it's just he's gone, he's long gone and stuff. But there's still someone that can hold the family legacy, or be able to kind of tell the story. You know what I mean? So it was a good one.
I think it's important to show, because to me that's part of the attraction of this life, is these men have this secret code, this secret world, this other family, and then they have their regular family, and they go back home and they may coach the little league. They probably donate money send their kids to the Catholic school, and probably donate money to that church, and do things for the community. And so that, and they're, to one guy said, he wasn't a mob guy to me. He was just my grandpa. I didn't see him as anything else but just my grandpa. He was a fun guy. He was a lot of fun. So, it's good to show, both sides of that, because that's part of the entire story. And we need, I think we're obligated to try to show the entire story. Now it's tempting to just show the murder part, because that titillates people.
If you don't paint the whole picture, they're only going to see that certain part that you put out there. And if it's all negativity and bad, you're not doing any justice for the people. Even if they did a lot of bad shit, there's still some more that went into, I posted an interview today that I did with RJ Roger, and we had this conversation, about, paying, like me and you said, putting the whole picture out there, because you said they were a father, they were donating to the church and everything else. So that clip that I did, that you probably saw, or that I sent you, that was, Myron Sugarman. He was talking about the Jewish Mafia.
Yeah.
They got in, they got their money, they left, after a generation. But you got members like, Meyer Lansky, who stayed in and made a lot of money. It's interesting that, Arnold Rothstein basically, mentored Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Frank Costello, Bugsy Siegel, all these kids, and they all went and became huge bosses in the mafia world. You know what I mean? And he was one of their mentors. He groomed these guys, and they thrived.
Yeah. I know. All right, let's look at this one with Joe Bonanno's grandson.
After the death of Salvatore Maranzano, Joe Bonanno would step up to the front of the line. Joe Bonanno became the boss in 1931. He had a very long career as the boss.
He started a bakery, but he had a bakery truck, and of course, they needed trucks when Prohibition hit. It all kind of came together, and he was in the right place at the right time. He was a really educated guy. A lot of those people weren't educated. He was a natural leader. He became the leader as a pretty young guy, and through his 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, he was the shit. Bonano family is called the Bonano family because of my grandfather, Joe Bonanno. He was when the commission, after the Castellamarese Wars, and, when the commission was coming together, my grandfather was the head of the family, and that's why it was the Bonano family, and became one of the 5 of the commission. And the name has stuck through all these years.
Taking a step back, Joe Bonanno was already a part of this crime family before he became the boss. When he joined the crime family, Niccolo Schiro was the boss. So you can say Joe Bonanno started from the bottom and worked his way up to the top. Over the next 3 decades, Joe Bonanno would prosper from great success as this crime family's boss. The Bonanno crime family was one of the smaller crime families in New York, but this made it easier for the members of the crime family to be close and trust each other. They had almost no internal dissension and little harassment from other gangs or the police. The Bonanno crime family made a lot of profit off their illegal businesses, such as loan sharking, bookmaking, numbers running, prostitution, and other illegal activities.
The only time he went to jail was he went to Canada, and they arrested him for a passport thing once. And then they put him in court because he wouldn't answer questions about the commission. He put him in contempt for court. They asked him a few times. He said no. Brought him 6 months later, asked him again. He said no. And after the third time, the judge just said, man, send this guy home. He's not going to talk.
During the mid-1960s, the crime family started to slip, mainly due to Joe Bonanno's involvement with Joe Magliocco in trying to organize a hit on Carl Gambino and Tommy Lucchese.
He got pushed out because he allegedly was going to try to take over the commission with his cousin Magadino.
They told Joe Colombo the plan, and he went and told Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese before it was too late. In October 1964, Joe Bonanno disappeared and was not heard from again for 2 years, claiming he was kidnapped. Magliocco managed to get away with his life, and they required him to pay a $50,000 fine. Magliocco was having health issues, so I think that's why they let it slide. But during the time Joe Bonanno was quote-unquote kidnapped, there was a war that had started.
Okay, that's cool. Having a grandson has a really interesting perspective, shall we say. You had your narrator do the crime story, and then the grandson told the kind of the family story now, how the family saw him. Very interesting.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I was able to expand on his story, you know, because he was talking about Salvatore Maranzano, which was, I think, one of the bosses at, if I'm correct, before the commission was formed.
Right,
after.
right. Maranzano, I think Lucky Luciano killed, he'll kill Masseria for Maranzano, and then he ended up killing Maranzano, and that's when he formed up the five families.
Yeah. And then after the Castellammarese War.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then after that, Joe Bonanno took over, and I was really interested in that whole part, you know, because I talk about I can always stutter on it, Castellammarese War. You know, I talk about that because it's not really out there as much as, you know, the families, the Bonanno family and everything. You know, they talk about the bosses after, but they don't cover like the first bosses that formed these families. You know, these, I guess, street gangs kind of they were, but they were still the first origins of the bosses and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the bootlegging and everything, that's how Joe Bonanno got his start, like we were just talking about, and then worked his way up to be the boss for 30 years. I mean, that's a long time. Not a lot of guys had that longevity, especially after him and his family. They did not have that longevity. There was so much going on with that. And, you know, they got into drugs and some became informants. Joe Massino was one of, I remember I talk about him in the documentary too.
And like
with the
Bill Bonanno, didn't he marry Profaci's daughter?
I
think he did. Now, is that going to be, is this guy Bill Bonanno's son, or is he another grandson?
He's Bill Bonanno's son. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Because I remember he told me about that, and we were going to do a whole nother interview on just that. So yeah, you're right. He married into the Profacis.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Kind of
it's
old
like
world kind of, you know. The prince of one family marries the princess of the other family, and will always have peace and have have that power. These two families joined together by marriage of their children.
Well, you know, Carl Gambino's son Tommy Gambino married into the Lucchese family too.
That's right.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you know, they did it, I guess, for business, and you know, he liked the girl, I'm sure, her woman. But I mean, it's interesting.
She's used to that life. Then every woman wants to marry into that life, and so you've been raised in that life. That's, you know, that's what you're familiar with, and that's what you're going to be attracted to, is somebody in that life. Unless you're kind of a rebel and you see, I don't want any part of that life. But if you want to be part of that life, that's, you know, that's where you're going to be comfortable.
Yeah. And I mean,
really always said, you know, how come we always find our one true love either at work or at least within 50 miles of home, huh? Then I find the other one true love at work. Then I find the other one true love, you know, about 25 miles from home. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, all of it is. So if, you know, everybody wants to check out the documentary and, you know, hear more about the New York five families, the Patriarcha, the Philadelphia, Trafficante, Jewish Mafia, you know, all them families, I go into detail with them in my documentary, and I'll send my YouTube link over to Gary, and you can check it out in the description. But yeah, you could also check out my podcast too, because I got all kinds of interesting interviews, mafia interviews, true crime interviews.
You get a lot of guys. Interesting. Yeah. Well, Adrien, glad to do this show with you, and look forward to checking out your documentary, some of the different episodes when you get it put out. What'd you say there was going to be? How many episodes? How many separate
11.
stories?
Yeah, 11 different crime families that I touch on. Yeah.
Episodes. Wow, you're really going into it big time.
No, 20 to 30 minutes each.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that won't wear a person out.
Yeah, I did. Well, I'm glad you were able to come on and be one of the first people that I interviewed and give the police perspective and, talk about Chicago outfit. And also you did a little bit with the Kansas City, but I didn't do one on them. But, we talked about the Jewish Mafia and stuff. So I appreciate you being one of the first guys to give me that opportunity and have me on your show. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Adrien. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Now, hey, you guys, I like to ride motorcycles, so watch out for motorcycles when you're out there. And don't forget, if you've got a problem with PTSD and you were a vet, or you got a friend or relative has a problem with PTSD and they're a vet, go to the Veterans Administration website and get that hotline number. Thanks a lot, guys. Adrien, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary.